Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We have another great interview this evening with Ken Hayes. Ken Hayes is a longtime activist from Northern California who's traveled through Canada and Cambodia and Romania and has been living for about 15 years down in Buenos Aires. And I ran into him recently and figured let's have him as a guest. He's got tons of interesting stories, so stay tuned for that. We have a very interesting hip news segment almost set to begin. So stay tuned. As we always do, we'll bring out the infamous dancing cannabis leaves.
I feel the force.
Our first story tonight is from South Dakota. In a 4-1 opinion issued today, justices of the South Dakota Supreme Court struck down a voter-approved initiative, Constitutional Amendment A, legalizing the adult use, possession, and sale of cannabis. Legalization opponents cannot succeed in the court of public opinion or at the ballot box. They're now petitioning the courts to overturn the will of the people. Whether or not one supports marijuana legalization, Americans should be deeply concerned by this trend and by the outcome of this case. 54% of South Dakota voters decided on Election Day in favor of the ballot measure. However, shortly following the vote, Republican Governor Kristi Noem facilitated litigation seeking to strike down the law as unconstitutional. In February, Judge Christina Klinger of the state's 6th Judicial Circuit ruled in favor of the challenge, opining that the amendment violated state requirements that ballot measures not encompass more than one topic. Today, the majority of the Supreme Court affirmed her ruling, opining that the amendment, quote, violated the single subject requirement in the South Dakota Constitution, end quote. This decision marks the second time this year that a court has nullified the result of a statewide vote to legalize the use of cannabis. In May, justices of the Mississippi Supreme Court ruled 6-3 to nullify Mississippi's Initiative 65, which sought to regulate medical cannabis access in the state. 73% of Mississippi voters had approved the measure on Election Day, a vast, overwhelming majority. Over the past year, political opponents of marijuana law reform have been more frequently turning to the courts in efforts to either repeal cannabis-related votes or to stop them from taking place. In Nebraska, members of the state Supreme Court struck down a 2020 ballot initiative months after it had been approved by the Secretary of State's office. Polling in the state showed that 77% of Nebraskans backed the proposal. More recently, Florida's Republican Attorney General successfully brought suit to preemptively deny a proposed 2022 legalization initiative from appearing on the ballot. South Dakota voters last November also decided in favor of a separate ballot measure regulating medical marijuana access by qualified patients. State lawmakers have not challenged that law from taking effect. Proponents behind Amendment A have already taken steps to place a new legalization measure before voters South Dakota in 2022. Some state lawmakers are also recommending that the legislature implement legalization legislation next year. What we find is the police are addicted to this corruption money, and it's not just in South Dakota, not just in Oregon, not just in the United States, but around the world. It's always the police who oppose marijuana legalization and the fascist Republican Party. We might as well change the name of the Republican Party to fascist. That's what I think. The legalization of marijuana for adults is associated with improvements in police clearance rates for multiple types of violent crimes, according to data published online in the print edition of the International Journal of Drug Policy. A pair of researchers affiliated with the University of Utah and the University of China assessed trends in crime clearance rates in Oregon versus control states in the years prior to and immediately following the enactment of adult use legalization. The investigators identified, quote, significant increases in the clearance rate for overall violent crime and for aggravated assault in Oregon counties relative to those in non-legalized states following legalization, end quote. Their findings are consistent with those of a prior study documenting improved crime clearance rates in Colorado and Washington following legalization, particularly for violent crime and property crimes. These conclusions reaffirm the notion that states can sensibly regulate the adult use and sale of cannabis in a manner that doesn't adversely impact public safety. In fact, it helps public safety. Moreover, in some cases, legalization may contribute to an environment that positively affects police officers' performance in solving serious crimes. The abstract of this study, The Effect of Recreational Marijuana Legalization on Clearance Rates for Violent Crimes, Evidence from Oregon, is available online. Across the mountains in Montana, officials are set to debut a special drug court that will be dedicated solely to reviewing and expunging past marijuana convictions. Under the state's new adult use legalization law, those with past marijuana convictions may petition for either the expungement of their records or the resentencing of their convictions. Officials believe that having a court dedicated solely to reviewing these petitions will expedite the expungement process. The new court's expected to be operational by early next year. Montana is one of more than a dozen states that have explicitly permitted those with marijuana-related crimes to have their records sealed or expunged. In recent months, officials in various states, including California, Illinois, New Jersey, New York, and Virginia, have moved to seal the records of over 2 million people with prior cannabis-related convictions. Nearly 60% of Montana voters on Election Day last November decided in favor of ballot measures legalizing the personal use and retail sale of cannabis. Provisions in the law allowing those ages 21 and older to possess up to 1 ounce of marijuana and or to privately cultivate up to 4 mature cannabis plants for personal use took effect earlier this year on January 1st. The retail sale of marijuana products to adults is set to begin on January 1st, 2022. Happy New Year, Montana. After years of delays in West Virginia, qualified patients in West Virginia may finally begin accessing medical cannabis products at licensed retail facilities. According to West Virginia's Office of Medical Cannabis, West Virginia's first licensed dispensary is now open to registered patients. A second dispensary is scheduled to open on Monday, November 25th. A complete list of licensed facilities is available online. West Virginia's initial dispensary opening is nearly 5 years after lawmakers approved medicinal cannabis access. Advocates have consistently criticized regulators' slow rollout in these programs, noting that no state had taken as much time to get a medical access program up and running. While today's news comes as a welcome relief for West Virginians, it's far too little, too late for the tens of thousands of patients who suffered needlessly in the interim as politicians and regulators largely drag their feet. In situations like these, it's vital that the law provides a home grow option for authorized patients so they do not have to endure undue waiting periods before they can legally access their medicine. Under West Virginia's law, patients with chronic pain, epilepsy, seizures, and other ailments may obtain a physician's recommendation to obtain medical cannabis products from authorized dispensaries. The home cultivation of medical cannabis by registered patients is not permitted. Over in Europe, Germany's future coalition of the Social Democrats, or SPD, the Green Party, and the Free Democrats, or FDP, are seriously considering legalizing the possession of cannabis. Lawmakers plan to introduce the legislation during the upcoming session. Parties known as the Traffic Light Coalition are pushing for the sale of cannabis to be legal for consumption purposes. A representative of the working group evaluating the policy said, quote, "We're introducing the controlled distribution of cannabis to adults for recreational purposes in licensed shops," end quote. The liberal Green Party and business-focused libertarian-leaning FDP have called for controlled legalization of marijuana for years. Officials have made the usual apologetic noises, however, stressing that, quote, "tight regulation and protecting children are paramount," end quote. That, of course, is next irrelevant, since cannabis is one of the safest therapeutically active substances in nature. Predictably, German police unions recently warned the coalition against legalizing cannabis. It seems cops are pretty much the same, and they're frightened fragility pretty much everywhere you go. The three parties also plan to expand drug checking programs. Authorities test drugs so they can warn users of particularly dangerous ingredients. The new cannabis policy changes are being led by incoming German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Legalizing cannabis could boost Germany's annual tax revenue by 3.4 billion euros, a survey by the Institute for Competitive Economics said this week. It would also save the German judicial system about 1.3 billion euros every year. The survey suggests marijuana legalization could create about 27,000 jobs, a notable boost for Europe's largest economy. The Netherlands has long tolerated the sale and adult consumption of marijuana under controlled conditions, but other European nations have been slower to follow suit. Last month, Luxembourg became the first country in the European Union to formally legalize the adult use of cannabis. Statutory legalization is a much firmer footing for cannabis policy reform than the Dutch-style tolerance. Luxembourg also became the first to legalize growing the plant for non-medical purposes. Cultivation remains, at least technically for now, illegal in the Netherlands. Our last story tonight comes from Illinois. The smell of marijuana since legalization does not give probable cause for officers to do a warrantless search during traffic stops in Illinois. Illinois legalized adult possession of limited amounts of cannabis in June of 2019, but Illinois police officers still use the odor of cannabis as a basis to search motor vehicles during traffic stops. However, the Illinois Sheriffs and Police Association thinks this ruling stinks. Local law enforcement officials complain this common sense ruling could cause issues when officers stop people who have recently smoked cannabis. I think corruption income from the police, from defendants in marijuana charges, is at the heart of the police motivation here. The police often use this as a pretext to search vehicles and seize money, and it's just wrong. The smell of marijuana should not be used as a pretext to violate our right to privacy. That's the end of our Hemp News segment tonight. Our interview tonight is with Ken Hayes. Ken is a longtime activist from Northern California. I want to also remind you that if you or a loved one are looking for a medical marijuana permit anywhere here in the United States, give our office a call. We have a referral service for out-of-state patients, so call us at 503-235-4606. That's 503-235-4606. Now here's our interview with Ken Hayes, and help us restore him. Good night. I'd like to introduce a friend, Ken Hayes. He's in Buenos Aires, Argentina, but he is an American and resident there, medical school student, and a longtime activist. I knew about Ken before I met him. Good to have you on the show, Ken.
Paul, I want to say thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure and an honor.
You have been doing so much for so long, starting in Northern California, in Canada, in Romania, and now in South America. So let's start with your adventures in your home in Northern California. How did you first use marijuana? What was your first marijuana experience?
I grew up in California, right? So
Right.
And I grew up in Northern California. We're really proud of the fact that we're Northern California, and it's a little bit different. We are very well known to be smoking. The hippies, the cannabis culture, a little bit of LSD in there, some mushrooms maybe, stuff like that. We weren't afraid of it. Huh?
Did you try cannabis before you tried the other hallucinogens?
Absolutely, but they all kind of came on scene about the same time and of interest to me around the same time. They were in the same mix, if you will.
You don't mind me asking?
I was pretty old. I was 13.
Yeah. So, okay. And so how did you become a cannabis activist? What motivated you to get involved in marijuana and the reform movement and cannabis in general?
Well, it's interesting because what came first, the chicken or the egg? I think I was an activist first. I took up political office, if you will, in junior high school before I really even smoked weed. So, and before that, there was a woman named Shirley Spencer, who was one of my mentors. She's still alive, thank God, but she was one of my mentors. She was a blonde a woman of German ancestry who married a black man from, I think, Alabama. And that was just unheard of back in the early 1960s.
And she was in San Francisco.
What's that?
She was living in Northern California, though.
I mean, I met her in Northern California. Yeah, that's where I met her. And she told me stories about how her husband, Otis, got kicked out of a restaurant in like 1957 because he was black, but he was wearing his uniform and he was with his white colleagues who were also in uniform because he was in the military, but he wasn't allowed to eat in the same restaurant, even though he was in the military serving his country equally, merely because he was black. And she, that really stuck with me. And she also taught me some other things. I remember that she showed me how important it is with the lessons of Martin Luther King. She used Martin Luther King to teach me how to give speeches.
Mm-hmm.
So I was taught how to give a speech in part by the tools that Martin Luther King used. And one of the principles was, keep your message short and repeat it. I have a dream. I have a dream. I have a dream. Drive it home, right? and that's the thing. I took these lessons with me throughout life. So I was an activist first.
One of my sayings that I like to say is that cannabis motivated me, that cannabis inspired me to get involved, and that I saw the laws were wrong and that cannabis was a good thing, and as opposed to the idea that it makes people apathetic. For me, it motivated me, and that's one reason why I'm here. How did you get involved in activism with cannabis and drug reform policy? I know when I first met
Well,
you, you had been busted in a California, tell us, in a California medical marijuana sting. Is that right?
yeah, well, let's go back a minute. Let's go back a minute because the truth of the matter is your friend with Jack Herrera, everybody knows that. So, well, it's not a secret. And also, so am I. So was I. And Jack came to my campus. Even before Jack came to my campus, he and I were both deadheads. He enjoyed the Grateful Dead. I enjoyed the Grateful Dead. And we found ourselves in the same parking lot, literally, more than once.
Yeah.
And
That was
what's that?
the Deadhead show experience.
Yeah.
Lot.
And
Party.
and he was active in trying to get signatures, right, in the parking lot, and active in trying to draw a culture in of people that were interested. And pretty soon, I was going to school at University of California at Santa Cruz, UCSC, and Jack had a book out that he was selling, and the cannabis hemp reform organization on campus was looking for money and to buy books.
So this would have been about 1990 or so, in the early years.
Maybe even 89.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe even 89. Maybe even around 88, 89, actually.
Okay.
And I mean, it was early enough that Captain Ed was still alive.
Yeah. I think he was around till about 2005. I actually met Captain Ed before I met Jack. He introduced me. But anyway, go on. So you were at University of Santa Cruz. Jack came through on one of his early hemp tour iterations.
And I got to sell weed to Jack Herrera, and I thought it was really cool. I bought the books. I sponsored. I was selling weed, and I sponsored the books. I bought the books for the club, and I thought that was cool, and that kind of got me a little bit involved, right? And then, but I continued to just be, an evil, greedy capitalist selling weed and taking advantage of prohibition. And I continued with that, and pretty soon I found myself making cannabis available to some of the other cannabis dispensaries in Northern California that are actually, one of them still even open. Lynette Shaw, the Marin Alliance, I was providing her with cannabis way back in the day, and she, had financial problems, and I was like everybody else back then, was still figuring it out.
Long struggle with the IRS that she finally won about 4 or 5 years ago. Of course, she's been a guest here talking about that. But yeah.
So I got involved through her, and also with Dennis, and eventually Champ was closed in San Francisco. I'll speed the story up. Champ was closed in San Francisco, and I saw that as a real.
That's what Champ is. And Champ was a local dispensary that was kind of cooperative, right?
Yeah. Have you heard of Champ? Do you know the case of Champ?
You tell us.
Okay. Well, Champ was a dispensary that was founded. It stood for Californians or Cannabis Helping Alleviate Medical Problems. And it was located in the heart of the Castro district and served the majority of HIV and cancer patients. And we had about 2,000 patients, and I was growing some cannabis in Northern California in Sonoma County, and got busted growing that weed for Champ. And then I went on trial. I got acquitted for that trial after 7 weeks. It was a disaster. I mean, it really tried to ruin your life, as you know. And I won that case, fortunately, and I'm going to tell a story that nobody's ever heard before because he's now dead and nobody has to, But Terrence Hallinan, the former DA, this is untold stuff now being recorded live. Hola? Sorry about that. There's people looking for clothes because they're so poor. They're just looking for clothes, and they ring the doorbell at random because they're that poor. I'm sorry to be bothered by that, but
You're in Buenos Aires.
I'm in Buenos Aires. There are poor people literally knocking on the door looking for extra clothes. That's the reality of that. What just happened now. Sorry to be.
Okay, but go ahead. You were talking about you were acquitted. Terrence Hallinan.
Terrence Hallinan. Oh yeah. The juicy part of the story. Me after the commercial. All right. So Terrence Hallinan, he was the district attorney of San Francisco, and he was a friend of mine and a friend of the movement, of the cannabis movement. And after I had gotten back from Canada, I already had kind of had the idea. I felt like, you get the EBGBs. You see these cases various times where like somebody gets busted, they get off on a state charge, and then the feds come in, right? And then cannabis unrelated, all kinds of stuff. But in this case, I just kind of got the heebie-jeebies. There was some stuff happening around me, and it felt like I was being rounded up. Scott Imler had problems in Southern California, and it felt like I was being rounded up. And so I made a trip to Canada to check it out. And I was like, maybe it might be nice to move up here. When I got back from that trip, I got a message from somebody that maybe that I should go have a talk with Terrence Hallinan. Well, I went in to talk with Terrence Hallinan, and I took Ed Rosenthal with me. Ed wanted to go with me. And Terrence said, I asked to speak with Ken. Close the door when you leave, Ed. And I thought that was kind of interesting. It was like, oh shit, something's going to happen, And so Terrence was like, maybe you want to leave town. Maybe it's a, lay hello kind of thing, close up shop. And so I did everything I could possibly do before I got busted. This is the truth now. I did everything I could possibly do, including put a padlock on the door to try and close that place up. And the truth of the matter is that once something grows so big, and it gets feet of its own and starts walking, right? And I wasn't able to stop it. And about a month later, 6 weeks later, the feds came after me. I wasn't there in California. I was in Canada, magically somehow, even though I was turned back across the border, and they stripped me of like $13,000. And it was a real disaster. Somehow I found my way across the border. And I got up there with I'll tell that story another day, but I got up there. There's a story that I told, and there's a story that'll come out maybe someday. But I found my way across the border, and once I was in Canada, I was able to make a refugee claim. I actually was one of the people. I actually made a refugee claim because I was a refugee from America. I mean, look at the disaster it is now.
I think,
you know what I mean?
I first heard of you, Ken. I heard about you when that happened and went down with Champ, and that's in the community. I know you've been involved with Dennis Perone and other things, but anyway, now you're in Canada.
Yeah, so I was in Canada. I was running a couple of shops. Dennis had his own problems, and Jack went on his way. But the movement started growing and getting feet of its own. Not just my club, but the movement as a whole started getting up and walking, and at some point started to run. And then I found myself living in Canada, refugee claim that eventually ran out. While I was living in Canada, I ran a couple of smart shops where we sold various interesting legal psychedelics.
Were you with
And
Chris Bennett or any of the community up there? I know Chris was deeply involved in that.
yeah, we had a shop with Chris and his wife at the time, Renee Bourget, and was fine and dandy and all until when as all good things, they come and go and must come to an end. And I eventually found myself having to leave. I was given what's called, here's a little point of law that I'll share with your listeners because I paid for this stuff. The difference between a departure order and a deportation order. Do you know what that is, Paul?
No. Well, departure,
Okay.
deportation means you're seized and they carry you across.
How did you know that?
Just from my general knowledge.
Okay, that's correct. I didn't know the difference because when they're it's Canadian court and they use different words in Canadian court as opposed to American court. I was used to being in American court, This is Canadian court, different words, different title, they even treat each other differently. The prosecutor is my lawyer's friend, Hi, my friend, It's like, wait a second, that's not our friend.
So did you have
trying to put me
back to California and face the music there?
Not initially. So from there, I was given a departure order, not a deportation order. As you pointed out, a deportation order is here, we're taking you home now and dropping you off at the border and handing you over to whoever. And a departure order is you can't stay here anymore. So I drugged my feet on that and filed every single petition. And Steve Cubby, actually, I don't know if you know who you. I'm sure.
Yeah, I know Steve pretty well. He introduced me to Timothy Leary.
Huh, right on. You met Timothy?
I was at his last birthday party too.
Right on. I got the pleasure of having a beer with him.
Oh, okay. But
yeah.
So you were back in the United States, and where do we go?
So I know I wasn't back in the United States.
Oh, yeah,
At this point, I was still in Canada, fighting to stay in Canada. And Steve Cubby helped me. Steve Cubby literally gave me the shirt off his back. I want to put that on record.
He is
in a jail cell in Canada.
Yeah.
And while we were fighting this deportation, departure stuff, and anyway, it came time that I had to go, right? And I left and I went to Amsterdam. And I stayed in Amsterdam a little bit and I made some connections there. I met some interesting people there, tried to find a way and make a life, and I wasn't really able to. And then the tsunami happened in Asia, and I had a free ticket to go anywhere on my, Visa card because of, money. You run enough money through a card and you pay enough bills and stuff, and you get a free ticket sometimes. You know how that goes with Air Miles. And so I had a free ticket with Air Miles, and I found myself in Thailand and to try and do what I could to help out with the tsunami effort, because 200,000 people died in one day. And here's an interesting point. I want you to think about this. In your lifetime, and my lifetime, can you think of a single day where there was a loss of life on planet Earth, 200,000 people all in one day? I don't think even with the pandemic, there's 200,000 people a day dying.
No, that was one of the largest losses of life in modern history with that tsunami, not just in one place, all around the Indian Ocean basin.
Yeah. I mean, people don't really think about it, but that was like, exactly. There hasn't been, yeah. Mother Nature, when she strikes out and lashes out at us, we need to start paying attention, Anyway, back to the story. So I'm in Thailand, and I was really moved by what I saw there. The loss of life and the emotion was pretty overwhelming.
But the water rushed in? Were you impacted by that, or were you safe?
No. I came after.
Okay.
I came after. Then there's some reasons behind why I came after, and I'll tell you later.
Okay.
More stories that I can't tell, Paul. Yeah. So I was in Thailand, and I found out that there was an impending disaster in Cambodia because there was money that would have went to Cambodia normally that was being diverted for the efforts of the tsunami. And in the end, the tsunami was overfunded, and the people of Cambodia were left in famine. And I went there and practiced medicine in the little town of Sihanoukville, Cambodia, on the beach there, near the beach town. And I even speak a little Cambodian.
Okay. How many languages do you speak?
About 8.
That's quite a few. Can you name them?
Well, yeah, there's Cambodian, right? I just spoke a little bit of that. I found myself actually thinking in Cambodian. So at one point, and even though it would be difficult for me to get rolling in it again because it's been so long, I found when you find yourself thinking in a language, that's when you count the language, right?
Yeah.
So Cambodian, Spanish, English, there's 3, German, Swedish, Italiano, Romanian. How many is that?
You didn't say Dutch yet.
Portuguese.
And Dutch.
Ik kan Nederlands spreken beetje auch. Yeah. But it comes out more German when I speak Netherlands. I can understand quite a bit of Netherlands because I speak German. So that kind of connects me to some of these other Germanic languages. Yeah. Absolutely. I can understand some Dutch.
All right. So you're in Cambodia. You're in Thailand. What happens now? How did you end up in Romania?
Well, I came back. I had a friend that also, he wanted to do he thought it would be a great idea because he found me living in Cambodia in these very rustic conditions, right? And kind of like, and you and I have both been there, kind of like Colombia. And he saw me living there. He's a movie producer, and he thought it would be cool to, tell my story and make a reality TV show or reality movie out of it. And so he actually paid, this guy's name is Eric, I forget his last name off the top of my head, but he paid and gave me some money to get back to Amsterdam. And I flew back to Amsterdam and hung out there and got involved with the Savory crowd and met some interesting people that I'll tell you more about when we're off the interview. And anyway, I eventually found my way parting ways there and moving to Germany to live with this woman named Olsa Okabedi, who I had met in Cambodia. She was really sweet and she was quite the love. She said she still is. We're friends. And Olsa, if you ever get a chance to listen to this, I hope you know how much I love you. Jag älskar dig mycket. I love her very much. And she's living in Germany, and she invites me to come stay with her in Germany. And I go stay in Germany, and I get to enjoy some beautiful music, contemporary music, but contemporary classical music. So.
Uh-oh.
Sorry about that, Dana. That would be Dana Beal calling me.
I think Dana Beal's interrupted this show before by calling as well. He's only been a guest a couple times, but I also am subject to his calls all the time about Ibogaine.
Right, Dana Beal, Ibogaine. Hey, while we're here, let's put it on a 2 cent. Dana Beal, Ibogaine.
When he was in jail, I heard from him about two times a day, and I went to the New York marijuana parade and was a keynote speaker, and I got him on my phone and let him talk at the marijuana event in 2014, I think. Anyway, another story. So you're in
I'm in Europe listening to contemporary music, great contemporary music, but it's classical. She plays a cello, and it's
Yeah.
from like the 16th century that had a value of so many euros. She wouldn't even tell me. She didn't want me to know how much it was worth. I
Okay.
don't know. The cheap cello was only 25,000 euros, but she had another one that was worth so much she would not even tell me, and she wouldn't let me touch it. I wasn't, nothing. And I could understand that, right? I could understand that. And but really great music. A really fun time was had. I had a great time. But eventually, there's something about the American male psyche that it needs to, it's hard. I don't know how to put it. Anyway, I moved on. I found myself saying, hey, also, you know what? It's time for me to pursue my dream of going back to medical school, and I can do that in Romania. And I did that, and I hopped on a train or a plane, and I flew to Romania, or got to Romania somehow. I think I flew to Romania, got to Romania, checked into medical school, was going to medical school there, was doing fine all year long, was right up to taking my first end of year exams with anatomy and everything, and I was doing really well, actually, really well. And then I got caught up in some shenanigans there locally, because as you know, there's a lot of corruption, and Romania has some harsh laws, and I found myself getting arrested with about 35 grams of various cannabis resin and hashish and so forth, and even some ayahuasca they found me with. And they, even though under European law the ayahuasca should not be a problem, um, it, uh, it was. It was. And they tried to sentence me to 3 years in prison there. But fortunately for me, the feds wanted me. So I only had to spend about 9 months, about half the time of what my time with half time, my actual time in prison, because you get some time off for good behavior. So I only had to spend half my time there in prison of what I would have had to actually spend, which was about 9 months.
9 months
And
half in a Romanian prison. And so the
no,
United
no. My 9 months was half of what I would have had to really do. I would have had to do 18 months of
Right.
3 years.
So I see. So you were deported though from Romania into U.S. custody. Did U.S. Marshals come and get you?
They did.
Yeah.
They did. There were three of them. We chatted, and I can say this: that the U.S. Marshals, there's some of them that really don't like some of our leadership, including Nancy Pelosi was mentioned by name. I just want to throw that out there. If
And that was back
I
when Speaker of the House. We're talking, what year was this? Like 91 or something?
no, that by the time I got extradited back, we're talking 2008.
Okay.
2008.
Okay.
2008. Yeah. And yeah, 2000. Now we're up to 2008, and I got extradited back. And my judge was Judge Breyer, who's the brother of Stephen Breyer, the Supreme Court judge. And Judge Breyer, he could kind of smell the writing on the wall, and he could see which way the wind was blowing on this. And you saw what he did with Ed Rosenthal, right?
Yeah.
So he even told the prosecutor, he's like, what has substantially changed? What facts of the case have substantially changed since the two Ed Rosenthal trials that the guy was the co-defendant of? So what makes the prosecutor think I'm going to give anything different than, right? And why are they wasting so much money in the middle of this financial crisis that is of such proportion?
Wow. That's great. And so what was the outcome of that?
Well, hey, I could have gotten 10 to life. That was one side of it, right? 10 mandatory 10 to life. Or I could have gotten something like Ed Rosenthal's sentence, which was a day in jail, which he'd already done, and $1,000 fine. Instead, I got 6 months at home with my father, which was, well, the 10 years to life probably would have went faster.
Really?
Okay. So once you were done with that, what was your next move there, Ken?
Um,
We're going through your cannabis life story here.
as soon as I could get out of the United States again and escape after my 3 years probation, um, and I still have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, from the United States when I go there, and it comes out in various forms. But and I can see, yeah. Anyway, I'm working my way through that. As soon as I could escape the United States again, I did. I left. I had 3 years to study up on, places to go. And while I was in prison in Romania, somebody mentioned to me, "Hey, man, Argentina medical school is free, and you don't go to prison for smoking a joint in Argentina." And I was like, "Hey, that's cool. I like that idea. That sounds good." So I got here and I found out that the free medical school is, well, almost impossible to get into and even harder to get out of. And not impossible in the sense that it's, we just passed 420 here. I'll turn on my demo. And uh, um, it's not that the medical school is hard to get into, like in the sense you have to have great grades. It's just a lot of bureaucracy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found out that it was actually easier and cheaper to just pay for a private medical school. It's only a couple $100s a month to go to medical school here if you want it. Anybody out there wants to go to medical school? Hey, I can get you into medical school. I'll even help you for the first couple years. There's a little plug out there. Let's get more doctors in the world. I'm very pro-education after some of what I've seen in the last 2 years. Anyway, so now I'm decided I'm going to be here in Argentina. I found myself working in a hotel, and going to work and going to school every day. And I put out the plug to you. Hey, Paul, if you're ever here in Argentina, I see you're here in South America, stop on by.
We first met there at Expo Cannabis in Montevideo in 2014. It was the very first Expo Cannabis in Uruguay, and Uruguay had just legalized marijuana. They were the first country in the world to do that. I came back again in 2015, though, but that was after I came and stayed at your hotel.
Yeah.
And so you're in medical school, and I know you had some other adventures. You talked about you were blessed to be able to provide Brownie Mary, or Mary Ruth Rathbone.
Brownie Mary Jane Rathbone. I got to give her. I mean, I've got so. If you want to interview me again, you know what I mean. There's stories. I was able to give, blessed to give Mary Jane Rathbone her brownies on her deathbed. And that was a real honor, in my opinion.
Many people, if she had helped in the same situation, that is a real.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. And I got, here's another piece of history. I was blessed to have, and I remember it clear as day, marching down Market Street in San Francisco in solidarity with Dennis Perone because he had gotten busted. And on my right was Jack Herer, and on my left was Ed Rosenthal. And they wanted me in the center because I was the idiot, stupid enough to be right there behind Dennis, the next one to be busted.
Right.
They were like, so what I didn't realize is they were serving up the sacrificial lamb.
But you survived.
I somehow survived.
So we just were with each other less than 48 hours ago as we speak right now. I saw you in Argentina, northern Argentina, in the province or state of Chaco, in the capital of Chaco, Resistencia, for the Expo Industria Cannabis y Canamo. And the way that this actually happened was really, really bizarre, because you had just flown in. Well, you've been in here in the United States getting some documents ready for your medical school, right?
Yep, that's right. I've gotten far enough along through my medical school. They put a pause on my button and said, "Hey, get your documents together, because eventually we're going to kick you out of here with a degree. So you need to have your documents together.
And another old friend of ours is Elvie Musica. And Elvie had told me a few days before that she had seen you at the 25th anniversary of Prop 215, the first medical marijuana law in California back in 1996, which was just, 3 or 4 weeks ago. And so I was thinking, well, I'm going to Argentina. I wonder if Ken is going to go to this event in Argentina too. So
Wasn't
that
it divine?
prompted me to contact you. And I found out the day before I flew to Paraguay that you were just flying to Paraguay. And we met.
You and I were pretty much on the same flight, but I was one day ahead of you.
Yeah, you were one day ahead of me. And so we met up in Asuncion, Paraguay, about a week ago, the capital of, it wasn't even a week.
Paraguay.
Yeah, it wasn't even capital of Paraguay. And so then we traveled across Paraguay and went into Argentina. The border had been closed, right?
Yeah, it had been closed, and it's just recently opened up to gringos. And as it turns out, the reason we had to take that long trip initially in Paraguay was because the border is still only open going through one point. So
yeah, so we had to go to that.
We got funneled into a point.
Right, and there's no traffic at all the other border crossings. And I came back through another one, but I had to walk on foot across the one nearest to Asuncion. The first time it was like a 12-hour trip to get to Asuncion, and then the second it was about a 5-hour trip to get up to Resistencia. Anyway, what did you think about the conference in Resistencia?
Hey, I had a great time. I stayed a little longer than you did. I got to know Resistencia a little bit and understand it. And, I think. Do you know that there's I guess some kind of special connection to, like, let's say, human rights and activism? They really respect Evita Peron and Che Guevara, and they've got monuments to them and so forth. And
like Resistencia, resistance. It's it's in the name, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think Chaco at one point in time was kind of like its own country. It had its own money. It's they're kind of their own people. I'm told that they even speak with a kind of a different accent.
I think San Marquis, the person who helped San Martin, who flew the Spanish out of South America, he was from nearby there. I saw his birthplace was very close to Resistencia, but he's the leader of Peru and Chile and Argentina, and anyway, and I think Che Guevara he's definitely from Argentina. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Che's from Argentina. I don't know where he's from exactly, but he was very well respected, and like they took that message home in Chaco, and so yeah, we saw each other there. But Paul, let me point out this, like I did with Don Workshafter. You and I have probably known each other for various lives, and this is just the incarnation at the moment. As we passed through incarnation the other day, remember?
We did. That was the border crossing out of Paraguay.
Yeah.
But anyway, we met up in Colombia a couple of times too. So tell us about the cannabis scene in Argentina.
So when I first moved here a decade ago, I used to say it was cannabis year 1998. There was pressed brickweed, very few flowers, a lot of, pretty much only pressed brickweed. In fact, you can still get, guess what? Pressed brickweed.
And Paraguay, right?
And it comes from Paraguay, right? And Paraguay really wants to end that concept because they want to grow good weed, and they're really trying to grow oil, as you and I know, because we met somebody on our way here, right? That's what they want to do, and they're really trying to improve, to do that.
And so you're messing around right now with a little jar of what?
This is a little jar of oil that passed through customs, and it also passed through the local national police, the Gendarmeria, and they even held it up and showed it around like, this is what the oil looks like, guys. This is what it looks like. This is what it looks like. And they handed it back to me and sent me on my way. They also found some seeds and some other things. They found, in fact, this syringe loaded with oil.
Did you
And,
have to pay a bribe?
oh yeah, and I did. I told you, right? And then I showed them this, and I was like, look, it's got the California stamp on it. It's got the California stamp tax on it. You know, I paid taxes. Do I have to pay taxes again?
How much did you have to pay them?
Nothing.
Oh, you didn't pay a bribe.
No, there no bribe. No, they didn't ask for a bribe. They were just proud to be showing it off and like, this is what it looks like.
Right. All right.
It was great.
Sounds good. So
Yeah.
now they have medical marijuana there. We've had Mike on a few times talking about his card and getting ready for this. But let's go more into your background. Tell us a couple of your stories. You were telling me some wild stories while we were on the bus ride and traveling around there.
Okay, how about a pause? Let's take a pause right after this dab.
We've had smoking on the show before, but I think this is the first dabbing on the show.
Oh, well, I'll try to keep it together and behave.
I know you missed 420 there. What can I say?
I'll try to behave. Okay, so I'm back, I think, kind of.
All right.
Okay, so a wild and crazy story. I find myself living in Cambodia. This is not too wild, not too crazy, but I think it's interesting. In Cambodia, the culture is different. The grandmothers put the ganja in the soup. Did you know that?
Yeah, I do. It's a very famous thing that the medicine soup they have there. What do they call it? It's cannabis really cheap there, and it's always used in the soup.
Yeah, and they put it in the soup, and grandma, it's something the grandma puts in the soup. And they also have Happy Pizza available in Phnom Penh.
Happy soup and Happy Pizza.
Right. So buy. Happy.
Okay.
And so I found myself there, and I finally had gotten some plants to grow. It took a year to figure out, because I'm used to growing in California climate. And it took me a year of living in Cambodia to figure out how to get a seed to sprout properly, because it kept dying. They wouldn't sprout. They wouldn't come up. And then one day I noticed some cannabis growing right on some gravel. And I realized that it was just so humid that it needed to grow in gravel. Basically, it needed to start in gravel, and put the soil and the rock and the sand way down below, and but gravel above, and it'll figure it out. And I finally had a nice, good-sized plant growing. And I had been living there long enough that the police decided it was time to come and, basically make sure my documents were in order.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a reason. They want, it's theoretically for my protection, but it's really so that they can come get a pack of cigarettes. And I was told that they would be there at some point, and that I would have to be ready with with cigarette money, or either cigarettes or cigarette money, and that it wasn't going to be, I wasn't offending them, So they showed up, and I thought, for me, it was scared the snot out of me, because I'm on the lam, I'm wanted in the United States, I'm on the DEA's most wanted list for quote unquote cocaine. The DEA lied about me, and I'm wanted, and I'm hiding in Cambodia, and here's the police looking at my cannabis. And they're sitting there chatting, blah, 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 and they're sitting there, they are all around the cannabis plant. And I'm thinking, oh, shit, man, this is it, I'm busted, And the I give them the cigarettes, and they're smoking. They're just sitting there around the cannabis plant, just chatting, smoking their cigarettes. And I'm thinking I'm busting. I'm thinking this is it. Cambodian prison, probably nothing nice about that, right?
No.
They get done with their cigarette, and flick it in the cannabis plant, and walk away. They were just sitting there chatting, having a smoke.
So you didn't realize that it's basically allowed there or legal till then?
Yeah, I didn't understand exactly. That it was tolerated, or that they probably more even so, to be honest, without like sounding, I don't want to sound the wrong way. They probably just didn't know what it looked like.
I see. But grandma
Right.
puts in the soup.
It just was. It's not one of those. It's not of importance.
Okay. All right, Ken. Well, is there anything else you'd like to talk about here today?
Well, I mean, I know I've got to go. You've got to go. I know this is a short interview. There's tons to talk about because, I mean, we're just getting warmed up, and I haven't talked about the experience in Uruguay. I didn't talk about the experience in Colombia, where I last saw you. There's a lot to talk about, Paul. I hope maybe if you have time, if you ever run out of material, that you come back around and double around. Remember I'm here.
Oh, I remember you there, Ken. I look forward to seeing you somewhere down the Cannabis Trail. I'm not sure when I'll get back. It's been 6 years since I'd been in Argentina, 2015. But I know. Tell me about the 215 25th anniversary meeting that I learned from Elvie. How did that go? Anything newsworthy there?
Well, it was interesting. I got to hang out with Ed. Ed's got a new book. I don't have a copy of it here with me. It's in the other place.
Another Growers Guy. I hear it's really good. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, and I should have shown it to you when we were together. Let's see. Lots of people were there that I hadn't seen in a long time. Here's an interesting story that I'd like to share with you. Pebbles Trippett. Maybe you've interviewed her before?
I haven't interviewed her, but I met her back in 1982.
I highly recommend interviewing her while you have the opportunity.
Yeah.
I hold her dear in my heart like I do Mary, like Brownie Mary. You should. It would be a pity if you didn't interview her.
Okay. Thanks for the recommendation.
I got the pleasure of. I'll tell you what. I'll let you. This is your segue. Okay. I'll let you interview her and ask her about the 8-track tapes that she asked me and my friends to try and put into digital format back in the year 2000, and who that was, and why she has those digital tapes, why she has those 8-track tapes, and why they're so important. I'll let that be your segue.
Okay. All right. Well, there's another mystery for our audience. Thanks for being on, Ken. And you, good luck with medical school. I hope you got all the documents they need. And we'll see you soon, I hope. Adios.
I hope so too. Take care, amigo. Ciao.
Thanks.